Hello, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of United States podcast. I'm Bela Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
This is our podcast about sailing the East Coast of the United States. In some episodes, we'll focus on passages and destinations. In other episodes, we'll talk about boats, equipment, and techniques. And when we come across an interesting person, we'll try to get them as a guest on the show. But before we dive into this episode, we need to say a special thank you to our supporters. Several of our listeners are supporting the podcast via Patreon. If you would like to join them in supporting the podcast, you can do so by going to patreon.com/sailingtheeast. Thank you so much for all your support.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, listeners. And great to see you. Who's our guest today?
Mike. Today's guest is Liam Kennedy. So he's a listener that reached out to me via email. And it was a great story as I got to know him a little bit more. He learned to sail with his grandfather. And his grandfather, who's now 92 years old and is still sailing on the Chesapeake Bay. So that was pretty cool. And Liam recently purchased a boat. He moved on board. And as I like to say, he's living the dream. And I think he's having a good time, and he has his sights set on going and sailing off to distant places. So we had a great conversation about that, and I thought it'd be something our listeners would be interested in hearing about.
Yeah, that's true. And, I think the whole liveaboard thing is fascinating, and I like these multi-generational stories always, too. So I like how this combines kind of the idea of multi-generational, hobbies and passions. Which reminds me a lot of kind of what kind of grandpa you're going to be. And this would be really cool in my mind if, you're 92 and you have some time before you're 92. But when you're 92, you're doing this kind of stuff with your grandkids. This would be cool. So, yeah, I think this is a really fascinating story, and I'm looking forward to hearing the interview. Let's get right to it.
Hey, Liam, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Bela, thanks for having me.
Sure. So in the email you sent me, I think I deduced that you are the third generation of sailors in your family. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's correct. So on my mother's side, my mother's father and his father were all sailors and boat owners around the Chesapeake Bay. And then on my father's side, my dad and all his family were sailors in Ireland. And so my dad's father was a captain in the Royal Navy during World War II. And my dad became a yacht captain in the 80s, 90s, and sailed around Europe and eventually did a transatlantic and wound up in Annapolis and never left. And now that's where I was. My dad met my mom sailing, racing Wednesday night races in Annapolis. And yep, they met and started a family, and me and my sister. And now I still obviously sail. My mother's father, my grandpa, Edward, and he's 92. So he has a long history of sailing, obviously, because he's, born and raised Baltimore local, and grew up on the Chesapeake. Started out with a Lightning, which is a small 2 to 3 person fiberglass sort of racer or picnic sailor. And then he bought or sold a couple other boats and wound up with a Pearson 35, which was right around the time I was born. So pretty much from the minute there, I was on board his Pearson 35, learning how to sail and, what happens when the boat's real heeled over. Because obviously, kid, that's pretty scary.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. That's great. So when did you start sort of sailing, I will say, on your own?
So, yeah, I did summer camps at the Eastport Yacht Club, and we had a small Optimus thingy, and those are like a 1 person or 2 very small children. It's basically like a sailing bathtub. And we had a lot of fun, racing some of the time, but most of the time just kind of doing the lap, doing the course, and going point to point or destination. We would go to a couple small beaches in the area and play games like kids do. And later on, when I was probably about 10, he would take me out with his crew for Wednesday night races on a J24 named Spaceman Spiff, which I believe is still doing the rounds to this day. And yeah, I learned a lot doing that, sort of just kind of observing, but also doing a little bit of bow and mast and sort of, just helping out with whatever I could. So
Yeah.
racing was sort of the intro.
Yeah, nice. And so you're in the Annapolis area, is that right?
Yes,
Excellent. And I can see you're on your boat.
that's right.
And so are you at a dock or on a mooring or?
So I'm at a dock. I'm at a marina here in Eastport.
Okay,
Back Creek.
very nice. And do you live on the boat or?
I do.
Just
Yes.
Oh, you do. So full time. That's your home.
Yep, that's my home. Yes.
Oh, cool. So when did you move aboard full time?
I moved aboard full time around the end of August. Yeah.
Okay.
I bought the boat at the start of July this year. So it's been a couple months and it's been a lot of learning. But it's been fantastic. It's some of the best memories.
And what is she?
Pearson 34 from 1984 and hull number 102. Her name is Impatient.
Excellent. It's a good name. Good name.
Yeah.
So this will be your first winter on board.
That's right.
Well, I think 2 or 3 podcast episodes ago, I interviewed a person who lives aboard full time in Boston Harbor.
Oh, wow. That's cold.
So yeah, that's cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cold. Oh, well, that's really exciting. So what was sort of the impetus for saying, okay, I'm going to live on my boat?
Well, so last year about a year and a half ago, I graduated college. And so I was entering the workforce and, eventually with the goal of, because I had an apartment in college, as you do. I went to Towson University, north of Baltimore. And, after college, I wasn't going to stick around. So I moved back home with my parents. And so obviously it was a great opportunity to save a lot of money. I didn't have rent. And, just hanging around on YouTube, one particular channel called Captain Q, the Yacht Hunter. And this was actually introduced to me by my grandfather. Like I said, he's 92, but he's on YouTube every day watching these, sailboat reviews and walkthroughs. And they're usually a pretty good bargain. And that's the whole thing, is they like old classic monohulls from the 80s and older. That are sort of fixer-uppers, some in great condition, but, for the most part, just boats that need a new home. And just watching these videos and learning so much about it, I eventually saw an ad in Spin Sheet magazine for a boat listed for $1. And I was like, This can't be real. And of course, I didn't know much about how many boats are listed for free or for $1, because this is all
Right.
when I was just looking at shopping for the first time. So it's true. It was real. It was a bit of a sad story. The owner had passed away and his daughter lived on the West Coast and they just needed this boat gone. And funny enough, the marina was foreclosed. This was over on the Eastern Shore in a small town called Galena. So, of course, I called my grandpa, and he was so excited. He was like, oh, we're going to look at a boat. Let's drive over there. So we get in my car and drive over, and it had been sitting on a mooring ball for like 4 or 5 years. So it was full of chemicals. This was a Catalina 26. So a very old and sort of small day sailor. And at this point, I didn't even think to live on a boat. Obviously, this boat would have been so small, it wouldn't have worked. But it was interesting to just look around and see like what was there, what work needed to be done. Of course, it didn't have a motor, it didn't have sails. It was pretty much just the hull and whatever junk was left on board when he passed away. So Yeah, going through there, it was like a hornet's nest, bugs everywhere. So we said, maybe that's not the one, and agreed to keep looking. So basically, the year following that, I was nonstop searching for my future boat, and saw some other Catalina 25, or sorry, this was a CNC 25, and was an interesting boat, but had too many problems. And then I went to see a Hunter 40, which was full of problems and had basically just become an apartment, and they gave up on it becoming a
Uh-huh.
boat. So after talking to the owner and realizing how much was wrong with it, my grandpa said, "You should walk away from that boat fast." So we kept looking until, summertime, and I found this boat on Facebook Marketplace, and it was listed for 15,000. And at first I couldn't believe it. The pictures were so kind of grainy. They were all taken in the winter. The pictures just made the boat look not very great. But from what I knew, that it was a Pearson and that it was a 34, and that by this time I had saved up the whole year, so it was roughly around my budget. I went to go see it with my grandpa, and it was everything I wanted in a boat. Everything, it was comfortable on the inside, sporty on the outside, had the kind of features that meant it would sail fast, and the engine worked. So the amount of work that needed to be done wasn't much. And, you know, we worked out a deal. And as I was actually going to walk away, they were like, "We can do 10,000." And I was just like, my jaw hit the floor. They knocked off 30% of the price before I'd even, had a thought.
Yeah.
So I couldn't sleep like that whole week, just thinking about it, dreaming about it, imagining making it my own and, fixing it up, taking it sailing. And ever since then, it's been an obsession.
Yeah, it is amazing how when you look at boats, um, some are some are like in abysmal shape, and as soon as you
Yeah.
step on a boat, you can tell whether someone's taken care of it or not.
Hmm.
I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
it's instant. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
it's the same as when you're buying a car or a house, right? You can tell if it's been ridden hard
Hmm.
or if it's been taken care of.
Hmm.
And oftentimes the difference in price between one that has not been taken care of and one that has been taken care of is not all that great.
Right.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
And it's just that the one that's not been taken care of won't get sold if there's one that has been taken care of is around,
Yeah. That's right.
right? So you can always find a boat that's been well cared for, and there's a minimum number of things that are worn out or broken. I mean, the boat that I bought is a 2009. I bought it 4 years ago, so it was 10 years old when I bought it.
Oh, yeah.
It had less than 200 hours on the engine,
Wow. That's
right?
crazy.
That's 20 hours a year. I mean, it was a dock condo for the most part.
Right. Right.
And so the sails were in good shape, and
Yeah.
they weren't blown out and stuff. So you can find those boats, and it pays to look
Oh, yeah.
diligently. So let me ask you this question: what were some of the parameters or things that you wanted in a boat when you went looking? Besides
So,
besides price, right? There's a certain
right.
price
Yeah.
ceiling,
Yeah.
and then
So
take that off the table. Other than that, what were the other things you were looking for?
I was looking for something that I could fit in because I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'4", and I fully accepted that I wouldn't be able to have full headroom throughout the boat. That's just unreasonable. But I could fit
Yeah.
comfortably in almost any of the berths, and I could like cruise around. I wanted something. Um, More than 33 feet. 33 feet was ideal. Um, just initially, I was looking at boats that were 25, 26 because at that time, that was, October of the last year, that was the price I had, which was a couple $1,000, but saving up the next couple months, I was able to save a lot more. So the boats I was looking at became bigger, but it was either a question of, do you want a boat that's huge with a lot of work to do, or, on the medium size with,
Right.
not much to do. And I was lucky because my dad is a certified marine electrician, and he owns a company here in Annapolis. They do lithium batteries and solar system, solar chargers, and solar power, and they're called PKYS Inc. And so he was able to sort of steer me in the right direction, but in general, he actually said, "Don't buy a boat. It's a money." I know, it's my business.
Yeah.
So that was discouraging at first, and in a way, I kind of turned my search in secret. I told like people who had no say in the matter, but in terms of my dad, I was kind of keeping it under wraps because, he thought I was crazy being, 1 year out of college and looking at buying a
Right.
boat. It's
Right.
kind of ridiculous. But I was able to talk to sailors that I had known for a long time, and they said, if you're going to live on a boat, 33 foot is the minimum to not be crazy.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's such a strange number. And, as someone new into the boat world, I'm like, at least shopping for boats, I'm like 33 foot. Like, what is 3 foot versus a 30 foot, because I was looking at cheaper boats. And I was like, what difference does it make? Well, once you filter by boat size, you see that those 33, they start having a lot of amenities and, a decent sized galley, a decent sized head, a shower,
Right.
a refrigeration space, a lot of other features, storage.
Yeah.
So that was a big parameter, I guess.
Super.
Yeah.
Super. Yeah. And those things are important, particularly if you're going to do something other than day sail it.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
If you're just going to day sail it, then yeah, you can get by with some pretty rough accommodations. But if you're living on it, or even
yeah.
if you're going out for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something,
Oh, yeah.
there's just well, you're a young lad still, but I'm at that age where I want certain comforts.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
I don't want
a camper already, so I rough it regularly.
right. I don't want to feel like I'm camping when I'm on my boat. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't mind camping as long as I can sleep in a hotel every night,
Yeah.
which probably isn't really called camping.
Glamping.
Yeah, glamping. Exactly. So let me ask you another question. Up here in New England, oftentimes you don't have a choice on the marina where you keep your boat. It's like whoever has a spot because things are really full. I haven't been down in Chesapeake in quite a while, but we used to charter down there a lot, predominantly out of Rock Hall.
Okay.
Yep.
I've sailed
So
there.
I've been to Annapolis a bunch of times, and I've been around that part of the bay the most.
Yeah.
Rock Hall, Annapolis, and my impression was down there, except for maybe Annapolis, there's a lot of marina space down there. There's a lot of slips. Maybe that's changed in the the 7 or 8 years I've been down there. But how did you decide on the marina that you picked?
So I went looking around once before the deal had finalized. I went looking around at marinas and sort of gauged price, availability, and there were decent options. Most of the ones I looked at were pricier than this current marina, and they didn't have electricity included in the annual fee. And then some other ones that were more pricey, you could understand why, because you have access to pools and tennis courts and that kind of thing. And then there were ones that were like sort of on the South River, like way on the other side of town, and not ideal. So there were basically, whether you ask or you don't ask, it's kind of an unspoken thing that you don't say you're planning to live on it, or if you do, like, you have to accept that there's extra scrutiny and extra kind of It's a whole spiel with that. So I actually, after consulting friends of mine, I have a couple friends who live aboard around my same age, and they know a fella who runs a marina, and he used to live on a 50-foot Chris Craft. So no longer, he sold it, but he still managed the marina. So I was able to work out a deal with him, and because I had already introduced to him, he was able to offer me a discounted price,
Nice.
which was in my case, a bargain. And so the amount of money I've poured into this boat, I justify by thinking, if I was to rent a house, or sorry, rent an apartment, either or, it would almost come out to the same price with the way rent is, at least around this area, or say in a major city.
Yeah.
So it was in a way a bit of an investment, but in another way it's lunacy.
Yeah. Yeah. And now you're going to keep the boat in the water all year round. So do things freeze down there?
They haven't in a few years. So I have a lot of like heaters on board, and they're the kind of extra fire safe heaters that are available. And say I'm definitely planning to winterize the boat sometime, possibly in late November, because I'm actually going away to the Galapagos in about a week's time. So I'm planning to winterize and try and stay on board as long as I can. If the winter is brutal, I'm going to be honest, I'll just go back home with my parents. And they understand that could happen if it's bad.
Yeah. Well, that's nice. You got an escape route, right? You got an escape hatch.
I'm not trapped.
Yeah. The guy I interviewed who lives up in Boston, they basically shrink wrap the boat. So they build a tent over them, and they use sort of a semi-transparent plastic, so they get the solar heating.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but he has some heaters on it, and it's okay.
This
so cool.
boat came with a nice canvas tarp, so I'm thinking about it was custom made for the boat. So I'm probably put that up if it really starts to snow.
Yeah. Very nice. So talk a little bit about the Chesapeake. So to talk about some of the places that you really enjoy, what are some of the highlights? And if someone was thinking about going to the Chesapeake and spending, a week or 2 or 3 weeks there, what are some of the places, I mean, besides Annapolis, that, are sort of must places to go?
Yeah. So I was lucky back, probably in 2010, I think. My dad and a bunch of his friends and his brother from Ireland came over with their kids, and we all chartered a Beneteau 50 named Club Carp. So we got to cruise all around the bay, and that was when I say I hit the most, must-see spots. So we went to St. Michael's, Oxford, and Cambridge, which are all on the eastern side of the Chesapeake. And they are just some of the most cute, quaint, small towns, very historic, lots of old buildings and history. And, if you like seafood, there's probably nowhere better to go. And other than that, I've enjoyed going to a lot of places. Rock Hall is the one place I've sailed in this boat. And that was just such an adventure. It's somewhere I'd never been, even by car. So getting there by boat was just sort of magical. And it was so funny because we arrive at the marina and everyone there is a retired cruising type, and we were just like, oh my gosh, like this is how me and my girlfriend we were like, this is how it's going to be. The dream. And everyone was thinking about boat projects, and it was awesome.
Sort of a glimpse into the future for you.
Oh, that's the dream. That's the dream.
Yeah. Very nice. Yeah, the Chesapeake's just such a great place. I mean, it gets kind of hot in July and August, but
it's rough in the summers.
Yeah, it can be brutal. But the months before and after that are really nice, and there's just so many anchorages and so many places to go and explore. It really is quite nice. So you've done some racing, and you've done some cruising around, and now you're thinking about long-term cruising or kind of living on your boat for longer periods of time. What are some of the key differences in those kind of three different categories?
Well, racing is just completely unlike anything else. It's exhilarating. It's it gets your adrenaline pumping, and if you've never been on a race boat, in the 5 minutes before the start line, it is chaos. There's 5 different boat classes, and each class has 10 boats, and they're all jockeying for position on this short starting line and waiting for the countdown to everything sets off. And you can win or lose the race in that 5 minutes right before the start. So, racing is just, honestly, I think it's the best way to sail as a guest. As an owner, racing is the most terrifying way to sail, because I mean, even just this year, I was in a collision for the first time during a race, and I had this is what you do. You walk the docks. So I went on a Wednesday right after work, and I had a crew lined up, but they bailed on the last minute. So I was like, well, I'm already here. I'm going to walk up and down and see, hey, does anyone need crew for sailing tonight? And they were like, sure, we're leaving in 2 minutes. Hop on. And I get on, and once we're out on the course, we hit the first mark or two, and we're heading north up towards the Bay Bridge, and out of nowhere, I'm on the bow. So I was the first one to see them come in. They just came 90-degree angle right into the bow of the boat. So that's not to say that that's a very common occurrence. Most races, you will meet some of the best people, and you will learn about ways to improve your sailing and your strategies, and the rules of the water, and learning to respect the weather conditions and prepare for anything is a huge part of racing. And cruising is all just fun and games. Cruising is the perfect road trip where you're not on the road, you're on the water. And I can't say that I've done more racing than I've done cruising, but of the cruising I've done, whether it was a charter in the Caribbean or around the bay, or just any kind of sailing, and I would say racing is the most fun way to learn about sailing and the easiest way to get a grasp of it. And ideally, it's not as stressful as a head-on collision. And most times, you're watching all the spinnakers, and you're setting everything up, and there's generally screaming and yelling. If you're a competitive boat, there will be a lot more stress, or let's say just shouting. But it's all team goal, is that everyone wants to sail fast. And so it gets you this kind of sixth sense that when you feel when the boat is slowing down, you know that something needs to change. So you're adjusting the Vang, you're adjusting the outhaul, you're adjusting the Traveler, the Cunningham. There's trimming of all the sails, your weight distribution affects things. And then, you have to navigate across a course. And sailing is awesome, but racing is the best.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think the walking the docks, if someone wants to get into sailing, walking a dock on a Wednesday night or Thursday night, whatever night they sail, that's close to you, is the best way to get some experience. And it's not too long. It's maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours. So it's not like it's a 48-hour sail.
Oh yeah.
So even if you're not having a fun time, it's going to be over soon.
Yep.
And I think you want to be really honest about your experience or lack of experience, because you don't want to oversell yourself. And then the captain or the owner of the boat gives you a job and you don't know how to do it because that'll be immediately obvious.
Yep.
So I just think it's a great way. It's a great way to meet a bunch of nice people. And I think after you do that for 3 or 4 or 5 different boats, you'll also get a feel for how different boats run. And I think there's a lot of great experience and knowledge in that, and seeing how different people manage not just a crew, but manage the boat. You know, when do they reef? When do they not reef? When, you know, how hard are they going to push? And oftentimes when you push really hard, the boat actually doesn't go faster.
Yeah.
So, you know, you pick up on all that stuff. So I agree with you. I think it's so much better to go out for 10 Wednesday nights. You'll learn more 10 Wednesday nights, you know, 2 hours each night than you will spending 5 days on a cruising boat, going from anchorage to anchorage and drinking beer all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So excellent. So what are your plans?
Yeah, so they're tentative now. Obviously I still work full time.
Well, Liam, you're on a sailboat. All plans are tentative.
Okay, well there we go. That's all about it. The tentative plans are sailing down to Florida and over to the Bahamas.
Nice.
And trying to hit as many Caribbean islands as I can before the hurricanes are approaching, and I have to go run back to the East Coast.
And what's the time horizon for that?
That would be probably in July or August of 2024.
Okay, so the tail end of next summer.
Yep.
Very nice. Make your way down to Florida and then hop across.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super. I've done that trip once going down and once coming up. And and we did some of it on the inside, some of it on the outside.
Yeah.
And both parts are nice.
Yeah.
There's parts of going on the outside that are really nice. And there's parts of the inside meaning the intercoastal waterway that are really, really nice. And when I did those trips, I did them from up in New England. So there are parts of it you have to do outside, like the coast of New Jersey is pretty much, you know, there's one place you can kind of pull into, which is Atlantic City. But we just did that as an overnight, you know, a 24-hour from Sandy Hook down to Cape May.
Oh yeah.
So so that sounds really great. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And you have someone's going to, I don't mean to ask personal questions, but are you going to have someone sailing with you, or are you going to do this solo?
Hopefully I'd have friends, you know, stopping in parts of the way, and I don't have the setup right now for it to be sailed solo because it's sort of an old-fashioned boat where you have to raise all the main and have it's from the mast. So that makes it hard to do without an autopilot. You know, leaving the cockpit, and you know, I would ideally have at least 2 people on board. So whether it's my girlfriend or, you know, some of my friends who take time off work and can help me out, that would be
nice.
ideal. Doing it solo, just too many things can go wrong.
Yeah. So my boat has an autopilot, and all the lines come into the cockpit.
That's perfect.
Even with that, you still have to have an autopilot.
Right.
Right. Because if you're if you're adjusting sails or you're reefing a sail, chances are the boat's not balanced very well. So you can't take your hands off the wheel.
Yeah.
So you have to have an autopilot. So I think that's just number one. And what I've actually worked on, and I've had the boat now 4 or 5 years, and I've gotten to the point now, it's taken me about 3 years to get to the point where I'm comfortable sailing it myself.
Wow.
And I've been out myself, you know, a dozen times or so. But that's how long it took me to get to the point where, you know, and I would go out with one of my sons and I'd say, don't do anything, just sit there. You're the emergency backup in case something goes wrong. And, you know, the biggest challenge, of course, is docking the thing by yourself.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's the hardest part, coming into harbor, and you got to either pick up a mooring ball, or you got to dock, or you got to drop anchor and the wind's howling. Those are the hard parts. Sailing it, at least for me, was more manageable. But like I said, it took me 3 years to sort of figure out, how I'm going to reef the sail and how I can control everything I need to do with just two hands.
Right.
So, and make sure the boat's still heading in a direction and looking out for crab pots and
Right.
buoys. And, there's a lot of stuff. So, well, that sounds great, man. That'll be super. So, did you ever take any like sailing courses, or did you basically learn everything, just by doing?
So, apart from sailing camps, I sailed competitively in high school. So we raced two-person dinghies called 420s, and that was kind of like the prep into collegiate sailing. So they taught you a lot of kind of racing tactics. Obviously, I had my boater's license, just a recreational boater's license, since I was 15, I believe. So we grew up with a small 17-foot Boston whaler, and in no time at all, my dad trusted me to just take it out on my own,
Yeah.
as long as I communicated with him where the plan was. So I was able to learn sort of the rules of the road boating that way. And just this past year, I started my captain's license certification online for the OUPV 6-pack, 6-passenger license. So
nice.
I'm almost completed the entire course, and pretty soon I'll be able to be a licensed captain and take people out on charters or rent charter boats without the need of an official captain, and so on. So that'll be my certification in that sense.
Very nice. Very nice. Hey, one other quick question before we wrap up about purchasing your boat. So it sounds like you got it for 10,000 ish. And did you have a survey done?
I did. So I had a friend of mine. We went to elementary school together, and I knew that his dad was a surveyor. So my mom told me, you got to contact Mr. Kelsey, and I gave him a shout, and he was happy to come look at it. And he did a very, very, very thorough inspection, and we found a lot of things that needed work. But almost initially, from his first 20 minutes of just going around the deck with a moisture meter, he was saying this boat is in very good shape, because a lot of old boats, they get very moist on the deck.
Right.
They have soft spots, fiberglass, and that's some of the most expensive things to repair. So, and then we did a sea trial where the engine worked fine and the electrical all worked. So, apart from the prop shaft, which needed to be redone, and some bottom paint, it was pretty much good to go, slight from some plumbing problems and that nature.
Yeah, nice. Because I always think that's a debate for people. At some point, as the price of the boat comes down, do I get a survey? Do I not get a survey? And
due diligence.
Yeah, I think it's money well spent, particularly if you get a good surveyor.
Right.
You gotta get a good surveyor, and there's ways of sorting through that. But certainly, I don't have enough boat experience, to be able to look around at everything. And I remember, the surveyor saw things that I didn't see.
Absolutely.
and pointed stuff out.
Oh, yeah.
And luckily, none of it was big. Otherwise, I would have walked away from it. But if they find something big, you could easily have a $10,000 to $20,000 extra expense on your hand that you weren't planning for.
Mm-hmm. And you want to know about that before you sign on the dotted line.
Exactly. All right. Hey, so Liam, this was great. I really appreciate, first of all, you reached out to me via an email, and that's sort of how we got connected. So I appreciate you taking the initiative to do that. That was wonderful. You've been a great guest. I've really enjoyed our conversation. And if you do go down to Florida next summer and head over to the islands, we should have an update. We should connect again when you're on your boat at anchor down in the some nice anchorage down in Bahamas, and then we'll do an update.
Oh, that sounds great. Thanks so much, Bela.
Super.
Thanks for having me and having a chat with me. I really appreciate it. And I hope we can inspire some listeners to start their boat ownership journey, whatever that may be. So
Yeah.
Appreciate the invitation, and thanks for having me on.
You betcha. Thanks again.
Bela, that was indeed an interesting interview. So what were your big takeaways?
I thought this was just a great example of how sailing, and actually many other activities that you do, sort of get handed down from generation to generation to generation. And I reflect back on growing up with my dad and my mom and dad, and there's certain skills that he sort of taught me, right? I'm pretty good with my hands. I can take things apart. I can sort of fix them and repair them. He and I built a wooden boat. We built a fiberglass boat. We restored an old car together. And, so those things that you do as a family or as a grandfather, you're handing down some of those skills, or at least you're exposing your kids, your grandkids, to these various different things, and they can decide whether they want to pursue them or not. And as a parent, that's always one thing that I sort of tried to do, is I didn't try to force our kids to do anything, but at least expose them to various different activities and things to do. And if they like it, great, we'll keep doing it. But if they don't, that's fine too, right? Both of my kids have sort of taken up running and sailing, which are two things I do, but neither one of them ever really got into fishing. Right? I tried, I took them out a couple times, but it just didn't take, which is great. So I just think this is a great example of that. And sailing is that way. And I thought Liam really talked, you could tell he talked fondly of his grandfather and the time that they spent together, and how he was able to number one, spend that time with them, and then kind of pick up this great skill of sailing and passion for sailing that it has really turned into for him.
Yeah. And like I said, I think this would be really cool if, 80 years from now, right, your grandkids are, 70 years old or 60 years old and talking about on somebody's sailing podcast or whatever a podcast looks like in the year 2090, right? That, and talks about this and talks about, I remember when I was a little kid and we had sailing school, right? So what do you call Camp Paradox, right? That's what it was called, I think, right? With your grandkids, right. And they're telling the story, and, we're long gone, but I think that'd be really cool, So this reminded me of that a lot. And, the other piece, the racing component of this was really interesting. And racing isn't really something I think about, but you've raced, haven't you? What are some of your interesting racing experiences?
Yeah, I've raced a little bit. I'm not a super competitive person outside of work. I played soccer in high school and college, and quite frankly, the longer I played, the more serious it got and the less fun I had. So I'm just not a super competitive person. I have raced. Now, I will say, here's the good things about sailboat racing. Most places where there's sailboats, either on Wednesday night or Thursday night in the summers, they have races. And all of those boats are, not all of them, many of those boats are looking for crew. Because if you're racing a boat, it takes 4 or 5 people on the boat to sort of do a good job at that. So it's a great way, if you're interested to sort of get on a boat and learn something, to go down to one of these marinas or sail yacht clubs and walk the docks, as they say, and you can probably get on a sailboat and learn some skills. And just be honest about your experience level, so there's no surprises. But even if you're just a passenger and they just use you to help balance out the boat, like, okay, when we're going in this direction, be on this side of the boat, and we're going the other direction, I want you on the other side of the boat. you'll still learn some stuff and pick that up. So I think that's great. For me, the other thing that racing does is that it really teaches you how the fine adjustments that you make on a sailboat will make a difference in how fast the darn thing goes. Right? And it's amazing, right? You adjust the sail. You take your rope, your line, your main sheet, as it's called, and you pull it in 6 inches. And so you really didn't move the sail that much, right? The main sheet is the rope that controls the angle of the main sail. And you pull it in 6 inches. So it barely moves the sail at all, but the boat goes a half a knot faster.
And you can feel it, right? And it's not something you could tell on a
feel
YouTube video or in a classroom.
No,
right?
No. And when you're cruising around Narragansett Bay, I don't really care about that. But when you're in a race, you care about it. So it really hones your skills. It hones your sort of skills in steering the boat, and also in sort of adjusting the sails. And that's good skills to have, regardless of what you're doing. To me, personally, racing, I gained some good experience. I gained some good skills, but it's not something that sort of stuck with me because, as I like to say, I sail to relieve tension, not cause it. And sometimes highly competitive sailing, at least for me, caused more tension than I wanted to have in that particular situation. But it's great.
Some
It's
people
great,
love it. I
Oh,
know
yeah,
a couple people,
absolutely.
maybe we'll get them on the podcast, that are really hardcore into sailing,
Yeah,
racing, and that would be interesting. So I'll work on that.
that'd be great. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people love it. And like Narragansett Bay off of our marina
Yeah, you
on
see them.
Wednesday. Yeah, we see them Wednesday
See
nights
'em,
and
yeah.
Thursday nights. And people are out there racing around the buoys, as they say. So there's a lot of people who love doing it. And you can take that as seriously or as unseriously as you want to, right? So you don't have to be serious about it.
Right. I think there's some people that they do it with a group of friends that they've done it with
Right.
for years, and they afterwards have a beverage and right. And
Right.
watch
It's
the
a
sun go
social
down
event.
or whatever. It's a social
Right.
event with
Right.
the competition part, but that's not the main thing. And some people, I think, it's the competition that drives it. So
Right.
interesting.
Right.
And then, and so it's a neat mix to say, okay, I'm going to live aboard my boat, and then on my off, for my free time, I'm going to go on somebody else's boat and race, which is always kind of an interesting thing to me. But hey, it's cool, and it's neat to see young people finding their own way and figuring out how to live the life that they want. And so I think it was a really refreshing story, in that sense, and really interesting human.
Yeah, I agree. I had a great conversation with him. I really enjoyed it.
Cool. Well, what do you think? Should we wrap this one up?
Sounds good, Mike.
All right. So listeners, once again, thanks for joining us for yet another episode. And we hope you found the conversation interesting and thought-provoking, just like we did. And as always, if you have questions about what we've discussed, feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
Hey, and if you enjoyed the podcast, hit that follow button on your favorite podcasting application. It'll boost us up in the rankings, and it'll make it easier for other potential listeners to find the podcast. And if you know of someone that would be a good guest for the show, reach out to us and let us know. Hope to see you out there. It's wintertime here in upstate New York, so the boat's put away. I got my skis out and enjoying that part of the season, but we'll see you all soon.
All right, Bela, from over here in Münster, Germany, auf Wiedersehen.